This podcast is sponsored by Oddities Coffee Shop and Gift Store, located at 4182 Cordata Parkway in Bellingham, Washington. We serve up freshly ground organic espresso drinks, Italian sodas, blended drinks, and other caffeinated beverages to keep you happy and full of energy. You can grab yourself a bagel, donut, or fresh pastry to enjoy as you fuel up on some of the best coffee in Bellingham. If you're looking to shop or you're on the hunt for a unique gift, we have a great selection of toys, gifts, steampunk, anime, health and beauty products, and more. Next time you need coffee or you're in the mood to shop, stop by Oddities and we'll take good care of you.
Weird that
You're
you and I are
listening
doing
to
this
the
whole
Oddities
thing because
Podcast.
I never really knew much about like murder and like, you know what I mean? Like I've seen the documentaries, but like it's
The
just
deep dives are a lot
baffling
different.
how they go unsolved.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, so many of them.
Yeah.
So many.
Even when they
He's
know the person, he just didn't
Yeah.
give them all of their information. Even now, like May of this year, the FBI put out a thing saying, you know, we're trying to figure out these full 11 people that we think he killed. He's been gone since 2012. We
Yeah.
have all this information on him, but yet we still can't
Mhm.
put the pieces together.
Did you look up the Zodiac killer thing?
I did, and it sounds like there's a lot of speculation on whether or not there is validity to that. And the FBI said that they're not giving credit to those people, and they don't think that he's been found.
I saw that headline. I didn't read it. Did they say why they don't think that group is accurate in their
No,
findings?
but they're kind of, it's one of those things where it's like they're playing it off like they're just staying
Yeah.
tight-lipped.
I feel like
but-
when you have that many fucking people part of a group, like they literally had 40, that case breaker group has like
Oh, yeah.
40 detectives,
Yeah.
dozens of former military, like it's a large group of people
Yeah,
that just research cold cases.
okay.
And I don't
So they've
know
got
that,
plenty of time
I don't
and
know that the
resources.
FBI is putting that much effort into the Zodiac killer
Right.
decades later.
Right.
Like, do they got that kind of
Well,
manpower?
it's probably like a couple people in a back room being like, okay.
yeah, it's
you
like
know.
so I don't know. I haven't deep dove into it. I just read the article that
Yeah.
they say this is the guy and here's why. Do you think they're right or do you think they're wrong?
I don't know.
I haven't done a lot of reading on it.
My big joke to Dustin was, oh, I thought we already knew. Wasn't it like Ted Cruz?
Did you ever see the Zodiac movie?
I haven't.
You
no.
haven't?
No, is it good?
Oh, it's so good with Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, okay. Pretty decent cast.
Oh,
then.
it's good.
Okay.
should see
I'll
Zodiac.
I'll have to put that on my list.
Yeah.
I actually got into, like, my awareness of the Zodiac Killer was brought forth when I was on one of those weird articles where it's like 30 weird things spotted from Google Maps. And one of them was this supposed drug, like a drag line of blood
Let me get some water.
along a dock. And
that was for what case?
well, I don't know. It was, well, I'm guessing it was a Zodiac Killer case, but that was like what brought it to my awareness was this stupid little article about 30 weird things spotted from Google Maps. And it was a satellite photo of someone dragging a body to a lake from a dock. And it was supposedly in an area where one of the Zodiac victims had been found, and there were some, you know, telltale things that the Zodiac Killer had left behind, you know, clue-wise. So,
Man, it's got to be fun to research that stuff. It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
hard too. But did you So I texted you the Gabby
Yep.
Petito. Is that how you say her last name?
Petito, yeah.
I called it. I knew it was in my mind, and before I was like, it's got to be strangulation because the way I envisioned it with my psychic ability was like they got into a fight. She
Yeah.
started hitting him, and he just fucking snapped and killed her,
Mhm.
and like in a fit of fucking rage or
Well, and
whatever.
I don't know if you had heard or like followed up with the updates, but apparently there was a woman and her boyfriend who spotted Gabby and her boyfriend at a restaurant called the Merry Little
I
Piglets.
heard about that, and he was being a dick to
And
the
he
waitress.
was being a huge dick, and she came in and apologized. And according to the timeline they now have via the coroner, you know, kind of piecing things together based on what he said, they pretty much think that she could have been killed anywhere between the 27th and the 29th. And the day that they were fighting at the Merry Piglets was the 27th.
Okay.
And so half of me wonders at what point was that fight spilling over, you know, maybe it was like the Moab incident where
Yeah.
they got into a fight and they're driving and they're still fighting, and then they get back to the campsite, it escalates, and it sounds like her body was found. So I watched an interview on Dr. Phil with her parents, and her dad was saying that like in the area she was found there was a spot that was like a clearing where you would put a tent, and then there were like rocks that were missing from the mud that they had picked up and used to make a fire ring, and then her body was found right about in front of where the tent door would have been and like adjacent to the fire ring. And so what he's speculating is that like maybe it was a fight inside the tent or a fight outside the tent that was just Very much a crime of passion.
Yeah.
And I honestly wondered if it was premeditated because he flew back to Florida in between their Moab fight and when she went missing
Yeah.
to take care of some stuff at like a storage unit they shared. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, okay, that's definitely got to be premeditated. Maybe he
Yeah.
brought stuff back to clean up the scene. And now that it's strangulation, I think, my thoughts have changed a lot. It's more about, the
Mhm.
crime of passion and, you know.
Yeah. And I think he has mental illness.
Oh, absolutely.
He seemed, because every encounter, and you and I talked about this a little bit, but every encounter of eyewitnesses always say he's acting weird and talking weird.
Yep.
Like that's what everyone says. The people that picked him up hitchhiking,
Yep.
the people that encountered him in that
Even the
grocery
cops
store.
that are like talking to him on the body
Yeah.
cam, they're like, "Why are you so hyper? What's going on? Are you on medication? Are
Yeah.
you mentally
So
ill?"
I don't know if he's bipolar. He's got a personality disorder.
Yep.
Maybe he is antisocial.
My
I
first
don't
thought
know.
was definitely some sort of antisocial aspect.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact like all of his Instagram posts leading up to her going missing and everything, kind of exploding, progressively more negative and more dark
Yeah.
and more like, I don't know, just nihilistic.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want to be part of society and he was like looking down upon the people who were crowding the national parks and the people who were littering. And don't get me wrong, I get bothered when people litter and stuff too, but I don't
You're
feel
gonna
the
kill 'em?
need. No, absolutely not. And I don't feel the need to go out onto social media and,
Yeah.
to go on a big long tirade about how I'm so much better than
Mhm.
these people. Usually you just use it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And,
How long were they dating for? Did it say?
well,
I'm
it
sure it did,
sounds
but-
like there's a little bit of uncertainty because they'd been on and off since high school.
Okay.
Apparently she was a sophomore and he was a junior when they started dating.
Uh-huh.
And then it had kind of been pretty much on and off and then mostly on for like the past maybe year. And they had been engaged, but COVID supposedly was the reason why they called it off and
Mhm.
decided to do the van trip instead. But yeah, on the trip, apparently she was telling her mom that she wasn't so sure that the relationship was still heading that direction, that they
Yeah.
were, gonna stay together. And
She what was I gonna say? I just lost it. I do hope that they find him alive, so you and I have a bet.
oh yeah,
You
the
said
bet.
before Thanksgiving they'll catch him.
I sure hope so.
That's a long time.
I know, really.
If they don't catch him by then, I figure he's probably dead.
I felt like Halloween was too early of a timeline to choose. Thanksgiving's a little
yeah,
safer.
And I just for funsies said, okay, after Thanksgiving, so we
Right.
better drink on that. I'm pretty sure you're gonna win.
I hope
But if
so.
he turns up dead, then the bet's off.
I was gonna say if he turns up dead, then we just all drink.
Yeah,
Because it's fucked.
I really hope they catch him though, because you want to know, like.
Well, and his parents deserve some damn justice, and his parents need to be held to some sort of accountability.
Yeah.
So if they never find him,
I thought you get in. I mean,
you would
I
think.
guess he left before the charge. I guess if someone kills wait. So I don't know how the law works, and I wish I had someone that I could ask. But my mind was always if someone killed another human being,
Right.
and then comes to your house, you're aiding and abetting like a
Right.
murderer. But
I think
is that true if no charges have been pressed, or like if there's no warrant out for that person's arrest, or is it just always like if you know?
well, it's an
and-
awareness thing, I think. So if there is charges pressed and you're aware that they have a warrant out for them, then you're aware of what you're doing.
But what if you
versus-
don't know that there? What if that person comes and tells you, "I just killed someone"? The police or FBI don't know, but you still
Right.
let them live there. Is that still a crime?
I don't know. I guess it depends on how much they tell you. Like if they
Uh-huh.
told you they killed someone, probably. But do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the odds that he actually came home and like, how do you even have that conversation with your parents?
But I'm sure no one ever gets charged because you could just deny it, and be like, "I didn't know."
Exactly.
And if the guy who actually did it
and they
says that you
lawyered
did
up
know,
immediately.
yeah.
So you can't tell me that they didn't know that there
course they
were, some fine lines to walk.
Can you imagine? I wish I was like a fly on the wall in that household. Because they got to be under so much like pressure and stress, but to have like
yeah.
your son come back without his fiance,
Oh yeah, I'm
like,
well.
where's
and
Gabby?
right, and then to just stay silent, I feel like you really just shoot yourself in the foot that way.
Oh well, first of all, when this first hit the news, I was like guilty as fuck
Right.
because fucking you don't have to be a fucking detective, like a little fucking fifth grader, like criminology 101. Like
Right.
the guy comes back and isn't even worried about and won't talk to the police to
Yeah.
help him find his fiance.
brought her van back.
Yeah, clearly doesn't give a shit about her.
Yep.
Clearly killed her because if you love someone or care about someone, whether they're a friend or your partner or
Yeah.
your kid or whoever, you're freaking the fuck out,
Right.
helping the police, telling them everything so they can
Well,
find the killer.
And
You know?
hypothetically speaking, if it was something that he did that was unintentional and he was worried he was going to get framed for it, because that's the way his lawyer's been,
Yeah.
picturing things, wouldn't you at least then tell them, Gabby walked off, but this is where I last saw her.
Mhm.
That's all I have to offer you guys.
Yeah.
Like, at least something to show good faith
Yeah.
and that you care about this person and that you're not like an
Yeah,
absolute
I mean,
piece of trash.
every cop and person was like, he's guilty.
Oh,
Before that,
yeah.
because with no evidence, because that's how a guilty person behaves.
Absolutely.
Like,
What would you have to hide if it was an accident?
Yeah.
You would have a story to tell. And like, this is what really got me. So watching the body camera footage from the Moab interaction.
did you watch the whole thing?
I did.
I watched the
Well-
first 15, 20 minutes because I was like, I don't want to say it for an hour, but
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I didn't watch the full thing. That's a
Uh-huh.
lie. I watched like up until the last like 20 minutes and I had to shut it off because it was just like him and the cop in the car on the way to the hotel for the battered women. And it's like him and the cop just like
so wait,
shooting
what
the shit.
happened? I don't know that part.
So what ended up happening was the cop said, look, because you have marks on you and Gabby's admitting that she struck you, we're going to claim that you're the victim and she's the aggressor. And in this situation, we can't, like the Utah law states that we can't leave you guys alone. So pretty much one of you has to be able to separate from the other for the night.
Uh-huh.
And since it's, you can take the van, but then she doesn't have anywhere to go. We could take her to jail and that would solve things. Or you could go to a hotel, a battered women hotel, or a voucher for a hotel from an organization that helps battered women. And Gabby can take the van.
Uh-huh.
And that's what they ended up choosing to do. And the cop pretty much said, you have to just promise me that you guys won't interact tonight. You'll use this night to like calm down, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the crux of all this is that he seemed to be getting along well with the cops. He has the smile, the duper's delight. Halfway through the interview when he's like talking about how she came at him and he was just trying to create space between them to defend himself. And the cop's like, yeah, that makes sense. My wife's got a lot of anxiety and I could see how that would happen. And in that moment, you see him start to smile and start to laugh and his posture relaxes. And he knows in that moment that he has control over the situation because the cop is, connecting with him and empathizing with him. And in that moment, he knows that he's not going to get in trouble for grabbing Gabby.
Yeah.
And for being an aggressor himself. And it just kind of surprises me that after that interaction in Moab and how successfully he interacted with them and got them, to put down their guard, why he wouldn't come back to Florida and try to do the same thing and be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
it was self-defense, or, we were fighting and I accidentally shoved her and she hit her head on a rock. Because then it's not homicide. It's just manslaughter.
Yeah.
And that's probably a lesser sentence. I mean, it's, again, like,
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking, if you're trying to mitigate the damage that you've caused, you'd be trying to do something like that. But it seems weird that he didn't and that he just ran.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't really hide the body either.
No.
Because without a body, from what I've learned, it's hard to convict someone of murder without a body.
And it's easy to put that together because when he was picked up by the hitchhikers, it was kind of coincidentally like shortly after they had a fight at the Mary Piglets, and he was up at the dam. And he claimed that he had been hiking and camping out by the river for a couple days while his fiance was back at the camp working. And then when he hitchhiked back, he didn't want the person that was driving him to drive him all the way into the campsite.
Yeah.
I bet at that point she was probably already dead.
Yeah.
And he was giving a lot of information about himself to these hitchhikers, about his girlfriend and their travel blog and how he's been camping and all he had was like a tarp to lay on. Sounds to me like he was trying to build an alibi.
Yeah.
And then he gets back.
Uh-huh.
Takes the van, leaves her, goes to Florida, but then just bolts.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems really strange, and I really don't think that he's in that preserve or the reserve.
No. I never thought he was to begin with.
No,
I never thought he was. Yeah. There's been sightings. I kind of look up on it, the case every day.
Yeah,
just to see if there's any updates, and there's never anything.
No.
The cops got some shit, I heard, for like not handling that situation better, but when I watched it, I thought they handled it just fine, because what do you really expect them to do? Like, you got their word against his. You can't just arrest somebody and send them to, like, they're gonna get back together anyway. And it's just like, how many domestic violence cases do cops deal with where it ends in murder? Probably not, most of them not. Most of the time they go to like a house where the people have been fighting or whatever.
Right.
So it's like, but like, really, what would you want the police to do in that situation? Be like, no, you're lying to me. You're the one who hit her. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
what can you do? You got her word, you got his word. I thought
I
they
don't know.
handled it
Those
fine.
cops were trying real hard to find every mark on him they could. There was
Uh-huh.
like one on his hand, and he was like, "Oh, that was from barbed wire from
Yeah.
like a hike a while ago." And they were like, "Oh, well, we need to document it just in case." And then
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, is that something on your arm?"
Yeah.
And like, that would be my main criticism is that because he was so good at playing the game and
Uh-huh.
getting them to believe that she was just crazy and that he was just dealing with a crazy woman and
Mhm.
trying to mitigate. And because they bought that, they ended up missing a couple of really important signs, which was a lot of her body language was completely shut down.
Mhm.
She was hyperventilating. She was sobbing. Her face was swollen like this had been a thing for a while. I feel like in that moment they probably could have maybe brought out someone who's a little bit more into the like psychology side of it
Mhm.
to maybe talk to both of them to make sure that there wasn't anything that they were missing. But
Yeah.
when you have a snap decision call like that, it's really hard, and I don't think that those cops were made aware of what the actual initial reports were,
Yeah.
because it was called in that he was hitting her.
Mhm.
And then when they were on scene, she was saying that she was hitting him first. So that's all they had to go off of was their
Yeah.
word. But looking at her reaction, it just, I mean, hindsight is 2020, right?
Uh-huh.
But looking back, it just really seems weird how relaxed he is. He's got his hands in his pockets, his shoulders are relaxed, he's smiling, he's laughing. And then you have her in the back seat of the cop car, like hyperventilating, faces red, literally just holding on to herself, like soothing
Mhm.
body language. And I don't know, it just, the dichotomy between the two and the difference between the two is just really astounding, especially knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
And I hope that they take this and use it as like a
Mhm.
case reference later on for training.
Yeah. Well, the thing with that is everyone who wants to defund the police, you're not going to get that if you take money away from them. So
Yeah.
if you want better training and you want that aspect, because
You
I
can't
mean,
you can't expect cops to be psychologists.
yeah,
though.
I mean, they're trained to be, I mean, you can't expect them to be, psychologists and know all about mental illness and like know
Yeah.
everything. I mean, that's impossible. So, I mean, if you wanted to have like a social worker or someone they could call, do they
Absolutely.
even have access to that? How many are
Oh, and especially
available?
in Moab, Utah, I can't imagine, like, their whole thing is
Yeah.
tourism. They probably don't have a whole lot of tax base to draw from.
Yeah, and you have to fund like
So,
that whole thing. So it's just I don't know.
plus that, I don't know if you made this connection with the
Uh-huh.
two of them. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Did you hear about the two other women that were killed in Moab just like a few weeks
No.
prior to Gabby's case?
Uh-uh.
It was this lesbian couple that had just recently married, and they were kind of just like living campsite to campsite in Moab
Mhm.
and working at the Moonflower Co-op, which was the spot where Gabby and Brian were spotted fighting outside of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so a lot of people, their names are Crystal and Kylan, and a lot of people are trying to draw connections saying, oh my gosh, Brian's a serial killer.
Uh-huh.
Or someone else trying to say, well, what if Brian didn't kill Gabby? What if he just left her? And then the same serial killer that
Uh-huh.
got Kylan and Crystal.
How did they die?
I'm not really too sure of the details. I know that there was sexual assault involved, and there was also some battery and then maybe some gun wounds.
So, battery wounds?
Yeah, like bruises and stuff like that.
Oh, I mean,
Like
hitting.
contusions.
Oh, I
Yeah,
was thinking
some
an actual
battery.
battery. I'm like,
No.
I'm a little slow. I was like, what?
Like battery and then maybe like a gun
So
for
battery, you said rape, and what was the other thing?
and gunshots. Yeah, gunshot wounds.
Whoa.
And so I think from what I've heard is that the police in Moab were a little bit preoccupied with that when the Gabby thing hit,
Mhm.
and they're trying to investigate that from more of a drug
Mhm.
perspective. There's rumors and speculation that Kylan and Crystal might have been selling drugs on the side in order to, make a little
Mhm.
extra income, and that maybe they met someone at a bar that wasn't
Yeah.
super great, and that
Serial
transpired.
killers on the loose, man.
It is.
And those are the
And-
hardest ones to solve.
And that's gotta be so hard, you're just a tourist town,
Mhm.
Moab, Utah, right?
Yeah.
And then you have 3 technically in the span of 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Like first of all, that's sketchy for all the
Where,
people
where
living
did where
there.
did they find those two girls? Just in a campsite?
In a campsite that was not too far from like the city of Moab. Yeah,
Wow.
I can't remember what the name of the campsite was. It's definitely interesting.
Well,
to look
first
into.
podcast we did, we talked about the estimate of how many serial killers are active in the
Right.
U.S. right now, and it's
Right.
comes out to about one per state,
Right.
which to me seems actually pretty low. Because even when you think about over 300 million people,
Oh yeah.
you got 50 serial killers.
Right.
Very small number. I would think it'd be fucking so much
Well,
more.
and I bet that number's probably skewed a little because there's serial killers that move from state to state.
Yeah.
So do they count as the one in Washington or the one in Idaho?
Yeah, 'cause I think it said they estimate between 25 and 50 active serial killers.
Okay.
So,
Ugh.
oh, man.
Still too many.
Well, let's get started. So,
All right.
this podcast, we each researched just an individual case on our own that we found interesting that we want to talk about. So you're gonna go first.
I am. Oh man. Okay.
Unless you want me to go first.
I can do it.
I decided I'd let you go first.
Sure.
Because when I posted all the clips the first time, it was all me talking. So this time it'll be all you talking
Oh,
on the
please
IG
no.
clips.
Okay.
All right, go for it. What do you got?
So-
what you got for us? By the way, this is Michelle. I never introduced you on the
Hi.
first one.
Oh.
I thought about that. And I don't think I put up your Instagram, so you're just like some random person.
That's
My
okay.
friend listened to the podcast. She's like, "Who's that girl that was there with you?" I was like, "Oh, it's my friend Michelle."
Right.
But like, no one knew. So that's Michelle,
Hey.
and that's all you need to know. Okay.
Anyway, so I decided to do my research on Isreal Keyes, which is a pretty not well-known serial killer that frequented the Pacific Northwest for quite a few years. He got into burglary, arson, just to name, the lesser things, and potentially up to 11
hmm
victims. They can only confirm 3, maybe 4. But he was cold, calculated, and he was very in control of all of his situations, which is how he eluded capture for so long.
Mhm.
And that control was kind of a big modus operandi for him. He just liked having control over his victims. He liked having control over his life. And then when he did get finally caught, he only gave out information that he felt that they would get already.
Yeah.
And he had bargaining chips. He wanted a peanut butter Snickers. He
Uh-huh.
wanted a Starbucks Americano. And he wanted, I think it's called like a Wild and Mild cigar.
Okay.
And so every time he would give out a piece of information
He'd
about a
want that?
victim, he would request one of those 3 items.
What would I request? I would request a thin crust pizza.
Any particular kind?
Just cheese. I like to go
Cheese.
cheese because you can really taste the flavor of the sauce and the quality. Once you put a bunch of toppings on, you can kind of dilute it a little bit.
I could see that.
So anyways, I don't want to digress too far on that. But like, what year was this going on?
Pretty much, it's hard to pin down his dates because, again, he wasn't very forthcoming and his deviancy started in childhood. So from what the FBI can figure, his kidnapping, burglary, arson, and murder spree lasted about from 2001 to 2012.
Wow. Okay.
And
How old was he? Do you remember like that around that time?
I think he was like 40s or 50s.
So he started in his 40s?
No. When he got caught, he was in like his 40s or
Oh.
50s. His first ever like big thing that he confessed to, his first big deviancy that he confessed to, he was I think he was 18 or 19 years old.
Mhm.
And apparently his family was living in Oregon near the Deschutes River, and they had this secluded spot near the river where they would go and hang out and fish and enjoy the summer. And from the spot, they could see all the people that were tubing down the river.
Mhm.
And one day, Israel decided that he was going to take advantage of that. And there was a woman who was floating with her companions, and she got separated from them. She was lagging down the river behind them, and he pretty much just walked out into the water and snatched her. And he took her back to a developed campground, and he proceeded to sexually assault her in the toilet of the campground. And
Wow. How old was this girl?
I think she was about 16. She was a bit younger than him, yeah.
Wow.
And apparently,
How far was the campsite from the river?
it didn't say,
Uh-huh.
because this was all just like him relaying it.
Okay.
And apparently it wasn't very far. He had just kind
So
of dragged
he just
her off.
carried her there, huh?
Yep. He pretty much just like heave-hoed her. And the thing is by the time he was 18, he was over 6 foot tall,
So,
and he was like broad,
so he
big
could-
shoulders.
so it wasn't hard for him
It
to
wasn't
carry that.
hard, and he grew up in a very rugged lifestyle. He had
Mhm.
a large family, like his lot of siblings and not very much money to go around. So he was always in the woods fending for himself, hunting.
Was there abuse in his house?
There was speculated abuse, but he would never claim it. It was mostly just like emotional stuff. His family was super religious. They were part of the Mormons religion before they moved to Colville, Washington, where they then became fundamentalist Christians and joined the Ark Church, which is based their big tenets are the militia mindset, along with white supremacy and that kind of stuff. Hence his name, Isreal. And then his sister's name was America, and they had other siblings based
those people.
Names. Yeah.
So that was his first victim.
Right.
So what did he do? So after he sexually assaulted her in the toilet, where did he put the body?
Well, here's the curious thing about this first
And
act.
no one fucking sees this? I guess there's no one at the campground, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's Deschutes, so I mean, like, not the most populated part of Oregon. A lot of tourism, fishing, tubing kind of stuff. But actually, the curious thing about this was that it was his first claimed act of deviance, and apparently, when he went to go kill her, his idea was he was just going to shove her down the toilet.
He was going to kill her and then just shove her down the toilet?
Yep, because it's a pit toilet, and he figured the smell from the pit toilet would mask the smell of the body. But as he was sexually assaulting her...
Was she dead or alive when he was sexually assaulting?
She was alive.
I know that might seem like a weird question.
No,
but like serial
it's an
killer,
important
like
distinction,
Ted Bundy
honestly.
did that. You know, he after they were dead, he would go and have sex with them repeatedly.
Necrophilia.
After they were like decomposing.
Unfortunately,
disgusting.
It's definitely a reoccurring.
I just wanted to defend my
killers.
Question. That's all. Okay.
Well, and it's fair because he did end up getting
Doing
to that eventually.
Uh-huh.
But this was again when he was young and kind of just starting out with his career. And what he said was that she kept talking to him and she kept humanizing herself and she kept asking him, you know, questions about himself and talking to him and saying, you know, you really don't have to do this because, you know, if we would have met under normal circumstances and you just would have approached me, like there's a high chance that I would have just dated you. You're an attractive guy.
That's really smart.
And you don't seem... he's not attractive, so like she was probably lying just to save her ass, honestly. But it is a smart move. And he said that in that moment, it really upset him that she was humanizing herself, and he lost his nerve.
So he,
And in that moment, he swore that he would. He let her go. He pretty much lost his nerve.
Go?
He did. He let her go. He lost his nerve and he let her go. And in that moment, he said he remembers thinking to himself, and this was from the interrogation tapes. He said something to the effect of, like, and in that moment, I realized that I would never do that again. I would never let another victim go. He regretted that. Yeah. And talk out.
So did she? So I'm sure she went to the police. Like, what happened? What was her name? Do we know?
He said it's like Lena or something that starts with an L. Leah, Lena. He couldn't remember.
You think the investigators would go back to his hometown because she would have went to the police in that town?
You would think so.
And there'd be some record.
Right.
She got fucking lucky, dude.
Right.
I wish we had her name because it'd be cool to see an interview.
Or to see if she had reported it. He assumes that she just never reported it because she was so fucking scared.
Wow.
Yeah. God and then from that moment on, he decided that he was never going to let anyone talk to him.
So he was 18 when that happened.
18 or
How
19,
old,
yeah.
Or what year would have that been?
That was...
I'm asking the hard questions.
I know.
It's okay if you don't know.
I'm so bad with dates. I definitely know. I'm
just curious what years this was going on. I know you said 2010 or 2001 to 2011.
2001 to 2010, and that was towards the beginning. So let me see. I have these laid out very weirdly. I have the timeline right here. So that would have been in the spring of after the spring of 97 because he moved to the family farm.
So him and I are same age. Because I was 17.
Oh, were you?
1997.
Oh gosh, that's got to be creepy.
I know, right? Well, we're not all alike.
No, and thankfully you didn't live near Colville. However,
I did go to Job Corps in Curlew, Washington, when I was 16 to 17, which I think is somewhat close to that. But anyways.
Okay. Well, and the other thing too is he actually had a girlfriend later on, and he moved to Nia Bay.
Did he really?
Yep. And he claims that he killed someone out in Nia Bay, like October 2001-ish, maybe.
So 1997 was that first girl when he was 18.
Right.
And then he moved out to Nia Bay.
Let me double check the age thing. So let me grab the timeline. So let's see. Yep, 97 was Oregon, and then so he started out in Utah, moved to Colville, ended up in Oregon. And this was all his childhood.
How did he end up in Nia Bay?
That was after he moved. Well, first his family moved to New York and decided to become Amish, and that's where he broke away from his family. He decided all of their weird religious jumps were a little bit too much, and he didn't want to be religious at all. In fact, he wanted to be a Satanist. And he decided that he was going to get his GED and join the military.
He wanted to be a Satanist?
Yep. Because his family
my
was
God.
so devoutly
Well, I
religious.
guess if you want to kill, you join the military.
Yep.
'Cause that would be your best opportunity to legally do it.
Well, actually, that's the other interesting fact is he said that he felt like in the military he was under the most scrutiny, and that was the one time he felt like he couldn't wait to get out of the military so that he could kill more freely.
Wow.
And he learned a lot of his tactics from the military, like a lot of the jungle training that they had where they would stalk prey and, build ghillie suits and stuff like that. He took all of those skills and used them later on because he was just a man of opportunity. He didn't have a specific type for his victims. It was all about opportunity. And he loved to hunt for people in the woods.
Which is, when I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, I think the first or second season on Netflix, one of the FBI detective, whoever it was, he was saying that's what serial killers do. They look for opportunity.
Yep.
When you're isolated or you're alone. So a lot of that's one of the reasons it's so hard to solve is because a lot of times murders are committed by people you know or who know you.
Right.
But when it's a serial killer and they just wait for you to be isolated, there's no connection. They just kill you and they're gone.
And his golden rule was not to kill close to home. Yeah. He would always fly into SeaTac or Chicago and then take a rental car and drive thousands of miles. And then he'd come home. So what the FBI is now doing, even to this present day, is essentially going through all of his travel logs and trying to connect dates and distances that he drove in rental cars to missing person cases.
Is he still alive?
No.
No. They executed him?
Unfortunately, he ended up killing himself 8 months into interrogation, December 2012. Fuck. He wasn't supposed to get a razor blade and somehow got one.
He got one?
And he slit his wrist, and then just to make extra sure that he was going to die, he tied a sheet around his neck and then looped it around the ankle and then laid flat on his bed in jail and covered himself with a sheet. So that way, like, in case he didn't bleed out effectively, that he would, choke himself to death.
Oh, that's not a way I want to go.
His main thing was that he wanted control. He didn't want the media to find out because he had a daughter. And he didn't want his daughter to find out about all of his crimes that were occurring while she was growing up.
Isn't that fucking weird when serial killers have wives and girlfriends and families? Yep. Like, you wouldn't think that they could manage that. And maybe it's a very unhealthy. Maybe there's lots of abuse. Who knows? But
he loved living a double life. He felt like it helped him become a better killer. And, the other comparison we can draw here is Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy also had, a child and a stable girlfriend for a long time right before he was caught. And she claimed she had no clue either. And wouldn't you know it, guess who Isreal Keyes' favorite serial killer
Ted
is?
Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Yep.
Wow. All right. So continue. With what you're. I'm sorry I threw you off.
Oh no, you're good. The hard part is that the story, the timeline is so all over the place because when they found him, they caught him after his last kill.
How did they catch him?
By him breaking all of his own rules.
Oh really?
He killed too close to home. He didn't travel to do it, and he got sloppy. So his final kill was in March. Think it was February 1st, 2012.
My birthday.
What? Really?
It's my birthday.
Oh God, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Apparently he was just on the hunt for another opportunity and he was scoping out this coffee stand that was open late and he knew that there was only one woman who would close up. And so he pulled up, ordered his Americano, and then as she turned around, her name was Samantha Koenig, and she was 18. And as she turned around to give him his coffee, he pointed a gun at her. And in the video, you can see of the coffee stand, there's no audio, but you see her back up, put her hands up, and then he says, turn off the lights. So she turns off the lights. He climbs in through the window of the coffee stand, stuffs some napkins in her mouth, ties her up, and takes her out of the coffee stand.
Mhm.
Takes her over to his car, has to clean out the passenger side. Clearly, he's getting sloppy, right?
Yeah. Also, that's such a wide. I mean, you're just betting that no one drives up to that coffee stand at
Oh,
that
yeah.
moment while you're hauling the body out.
Right. Well, and he even told her, he said, lean on me so it looks like you're drunk and I'm just like helping you, across the parking lot. And at this time, he had told her that it was just for ransom
Uh-huh.
and that he was just kidnapping her for ransom and that if she played along and played her cards right, everything would be fine. So she was under that impression. And the real fucked up part is he needed to kill time because his girlfriend and his daughter were at home and they were still awake.
Uh-huh.
So he couldn't bring his victim home.
He was gonna bring her home to the house.
Yep.
Into like
Again,
what, the garage or something?
A shed. And
what the fuck?
once again, this is like breaking all of his rules. Like, don't bring the victim home.
Where was he living at this point?
Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay, damn.
Yep.
So he went fucking all over the place, huh?
Right. Yep. All the time, flying, driving, all over the U.S. And so he drove around a bit. And in the process of driving around, he recalled that there was a time where, Samantha's tied up and seatbelted into the passenger side. And they're sitting at a stoplight. And he looks over, and it's a cop car with 2 cops.
Uh-huh.
And in that moment, he's pretty nervous, but nothing comes of it.
Yeah.
The light changes. They drive off. He keeps going.
Dude, I want to interject real quick.
Yeah.
For all those of you who ever get kidnapped by a serial killer,
Right.
you never want to get to the destination because nothing good is going to happen when you get there.
Second location is
you,
always the one to
you need
avoid.
to fight if you have to bang your head against a glass window, like anything in
Make
your
a
power,
scene.
because you're probably going to be dead.
Right.
So you got to do everything in your power.
And if
to
cops see
scream.
anything suspicious, they're going to pull you over. And then it won't
Yeah.
matter if he ransomed you or
And
not.
even though it's crazy that he has a gun, and I'm not saying do this, I'm not giving like survival advice. Even just screaming sometimes will scare them, and they won't shoot you. They'll just run off. Like,
Right.
Obviously, who knows? But like, if someone has you at gunpoint and they're trying to get you in a car, wherever they're going with you, it's not going to be good.
Right. And
when you get there.
That was
So
his MO.
you
Is
got to
just
roll
to
your
take
dice
him to a place that's
you know?
remote and do the dirty work there.
It's so fucked up, dude. An 18-year-old. I mean, anyone, but like
Yeah.
young people especially. So he brought her back to his house.
After driving around a bunch and waiting for his family to
And
go
so
to bed.
she's in the back. And how is she restrained?
So she was in the passenger seat. And she was tied up like this.
Her hands
With her hands, yep, and probably her feet.
and napkins in her mouth.
And well, I don't know if she still had napkins in her
And
mouth.
this is when
by
the
time
cops
of
were right
car.
next to her.
When the cops were next to her, she was probably didn't have napkins in her mouth, but she was tied up. And
Dude,
was
I would have been
evening.
fucking slamming my face
know,
against that
right?
fucking window.
And that's what he said he was worried about. He was
probably
worried that she
terrified.
would make a scene, and that would
Ugh.
have been her moment.
That's totally your fucking moment. Oh my god,
So,
it kills me, dude.
He gets
Also, like,
her.
how do you? I guess she must have been, because why can't you just like put your hands up and unlock the door unless your hands are tied to your?
He could have
legs.
seatbelt. Well, and have you ever tried to put your seatbelt on when you're in the car and you're wearing a seatbelt? You put your coat on over top, and now your seatbelt's stuck in your coat.
Yeah,
Maybe he
dude.
seatbelted her in.
So what happened?
So
I don't want to know.
I know it was a big
Uh-huh.
weight to do the research on this. I had to do it in sections because
Uh-huh.
it's rough. But she got taken back to his shed, and he turned the radio on in order to drown her out.
Mhm.
And he proceeded to sexually assault her several times. And afterwards, they smoked a cigarette together. And she felt like this was the moment, like she was having some hope, right? Like, okay, he's going to do the ransom thing, and then I'm going to be, let free. We just had, a bonding moment over a cigarette, and I didn't put up a fight, and I haven't been putting up a fight. And then he decides that he's going to kill her. So he starts strangling her, and he decides that it's taking too long. Wait, no, sorry. I messed up. He wanted her ATM card before he killed her.
Okay.
That was like a big thing to him. He wanted to be able to have access to money, which is why he always used to do the bank robberies and stuff before too.
Oh, he did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was big into bank robberies and arsons, and those were kind of just like whetting his appetite for when he felt the need to kill, but he felt like it wasn't opportune. And also just
How many
money.
banks did he rob?
I think they estimated like burglaries in total, like houses and banks, was like 20 to 30.
Damn.
Yep. And so he wanted her bank card, and he kept her alive for that. He asked her where her bank card was, and she said it's at her boyfriend's house, and it's in his truck in the glove box because they share, a bank account. And so she gave him the address. And again, he's really getting sloppy at this point in his career. He shows up to her boyfriend's house, parks down the road, walks up to his truck, breaks into the truck, opens the glove box, grabs her debit card out,
Mhm.
and in that moment, the boyfriend opens the front door
Uh-huh.
and stares at him.
Uh-huh.
And doesn't do anything, just stares at him. And he said in that moment he thought that the boyfriend for sure was going to, come after him or something.
Uh-huh.
Just turned around, shut the door, and ran back in the house.
Uh-huh.
And so he was like, okay, cool. So he took the bank card. He couldn't remember the PIN number. So we went back to her, and she's still in the shed. And she gives the PIN number, and he scratches it into the bank card. And now he's decided he's done with her.
Mhm.
So he proceeds to strangle her, and he decides it's taking too long. It's not like what he saw in the movies. It takes too long to strangle. So he decides to speed up the process by shooting her in the back.
Oh my god.
He wraps her up in like a tent and some tarps and throws her in a cabinet, double padlocks the shed, turns all the heat off.
So he shot her.
He shot her, yeah.
Wow.
And strangled her.
And no one heard the gunshot, I guess. Like his
I mean, it's
wife?
Alaska too, so
Yeah.
I mean, people shooting in their backyard
Uh-huh.
isn't too big of a red flag.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then he just left her, and he had a cruise booked, and he took his daughter on a cruise the very next day. Yep.
What the fuck?
Right. I know, his poor fucking daughter to have to live with all this, like the timeline after the fact,
Dude, I
and then
wonder if
knowing
she's,
that
has she
cruise.
been interviewed? Did you see any videos of her being interviewed?
I haven't, but I've heard like from the true crime community that like she doesn't want people interviewing her. She wants her privacy.
Yeah, I would bet. You probably don't
She's
want
been
anyone to-
avoiding like
Uh-huh.
reading about things, but it sounds like she does know that
Uh-huh.
he was pretty fucked up, and she knows kind of the gist of it,
Yeah.
but has been protecting herself in that way.
Yeah.
And then he came back from his cruise, and he decided that he needed to do the ransom. So he defrosted
Uh-huh.
her body with a hairdryer
Uh-huh.
because
uh-huh.
she was frozen in the shed. And then he decided to take liberties with the corpse,
Oh.
like we were talking about earlier, the necrophilia.
Dude.
And then he put makeup on her. He tied her eyelids open with fishing line. And he took duct tape
Oh my god.
and used it to kind of rejuvenate her face because
Oh
it
my
was
God,
starting to
dude.
sag. And then he braided her hair the same way that the only way he knew how to braid hair, the way that
Uh-huh.
he braids his daughter's hair.
Uh-huh.
And he took a photo of her when he's holding the newspaper in front, and it's even like the best detectives couldn't tell whether or not that was an alive person or a dead person in the photo. So they, on the hope that she was alive, put some money in the bank account.
How much did he ask for?
I think he asked for like $10,000 or something
So
like that.
he had. How did he even? Who did he contact about the ransom? The police or
So,
her parents or what?
He actually used her cell phone to text her boyfriend
Uh-huh.
and said, "Meet me at this specific dog park. It's under the picture of Albert. Ain't she pretty?"
Uh-huh.
And essentially, he took the typed out ransom note along with the photo or a copy of the photo in order to be extra safe without leaving too many clues. And he tacked him to a bulletin board at a dog park right above a poster for a missing dog named Albert.
Mm-hmm.
And the family showed up, retrieved that. They had called the police. The police accompanied them. And the police said, yeah, you need to put some money in the account so we can try to trace this card. He's going to try to withdraw.
Uh-huh.
He has our card. So just put $3,000 in, and that'll frustrate him. And then he'll try to contact us again for more money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the family did, and it worked. He went around to a bunch of different ATMs in Alaska, withdrawing the daily maximum amount.
And all those ATMs have cameras on them, right?
Oh, he had this dumb little disguise, yeah.
uh-huh.
And he always had rental cars.
Uh-huh.
So
Why did he? I wonder why he got so stupid at the end. That's so weird.
I think after a certain point, you just
Mm-hmm.
too much confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Because
Yeah.
that's pretty much what he said when the detectives asked him. He
Uh-huh.
chuckled and he said, "Yeah, it's I just got stupid.
Yeah.
Back when I was smart, I wasn't leaving all these clues
Uh-huh.
and stuff." So pretty much what happened was he was driving around. He went down to Texas for like a wedding or whatever, for his sister's wedding, and he used the ATM card down there. And he started traveling east, and the cops noticed a pattern of these ATM withdrawals increasingly going down this one corridor. So they let their colleagues in the nearest town know, and pretty much said, well, all we could get was this vague description of this white guy wearing a disguise and a white Ford Focus in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So one of these mornings when he's out trying to go make some purchases and get some ATM cash out, he's driving around his rental car, the white Ford Focus, and he's going 3 miles over the speed limit.
Mhm.
And one of the cops decides to pull him over.
Mhm.
And they got probable cause to search his car. And they found all kinds of stuff that pointed towards, like ropes and like clothing from other people. There was just a bunch of stuff that made them kind of wonder what the hell was going on. And in that moment, he said that his only regret on getting caught by the cops was that he didn't have his gun. Because his big thing was that he wanted to have a shootout with the cops. He wanted to go
Oh
out
my
with a
gosh.
bang, and he
Uh-huh.
wanted to either kill some cops and then kill himself, or suicide by cop.
Uh-huh.
So he was frustrated that he got caught and that didn't get to happen. And in the beginning, he wouldn't talk at all. He wouldn't talk to the cops. He thought that he could just keep control and just keep quiet. But after a while, he realized that there were certain things that they were already kind of finding out. So in order to keep control, that's when he started making his demands for Snickers and Americanos and cigars. And he only ever confessed to 3 killings.
Okay.
One of which being Samantha. And in the process...
Samantha was the
barista.
The barista girl, okay.
From Common Grounds Coffee in Anchorage, Alaska. The 18-year-old barista. And he claimed that he took her body. He cut it up. He took it out to a lake called Lake Matanuska in Alaska. He cut a hole in the ice on the lake where everyone was ice fishing. He dumped her body in, and then he proceeded to ice fish. And the agent asked him, "Did you catch anything?" And he said, "Yeah, I caught a couple fish." And the agent said, "What did you do with them?" He said, "Oh, I brought them home and we had dinner, my family and I." Like, how messed up is that? You dump a body into a
Oh
lake
my
and then
gosh.
you proceed to fish from it and then you feed your family. Like,
Wow.
demented. So they found her body. And at that point, he only confessed to 2 other killings. And it was an older couple that was in Essex, Vermont. He had a propensity for hiding kill kits, which were essentially Home Depot buckets full of guns, ropes, duct tape, Drano, anything that he would need to dispose of someone that he wouldn't really be able to take through TSA. And he would bury them in the woods ahead of time. And so he had this kill kit ready to go for Essex, Vermont. And his first person that he was going to pursue was out by a reservoir. And it was a man who was driving home, and he was following him. And he gets to his apartment, and it starts to rain. And the man decides that, he's getting out of his car, going to his apartment, and he's going to book it for the door because it's raining. And Isreal says in that moment, that decision for the rain to start and for the guy to book it was the only thing that saved his life, because Isreal was out there and he tried to grab the guy and the guy was just too fast for him.
Wow.
The guy didn't even realize that he was about to be kidnapped either.
That's insane.
Yep. And so that night
he killed men and women, huh?
He was sexually motivated, and he was also bisexual, which some believe leads to the whole renouncing of religion and his, struggles living in his family structure growing up. Why he felt alienated and why he felt like he was different.
How many men did he kill? Or did they estimate? So he confessed to 3, but how many was he linked to, you said?
About 11 is what they think. And the reason they think that is because when they found him in his jail cell dead, underneath his mattress, there were 11 sheets of paper. And on those 11 sheets of paper, there were 12 sheets of paper. 11 sheets of paper contained bloody drawings of skulls where he cut himself and drew out a weird caricature of skull. And then underneath one of them, it says, "We are one." And then the 12th photo was a pentagram in blood. And so a lot of people, including the investigators, speculate that he had 11 victims and that his 12th victim was himself, and that's where the pentagram comes in. And he only confessed to killing one man. There's links to a few others, but he was less forthcoming with his sexual proclivities with men when he was being interviewed by the police. It was kind of something that they brought out from him when he was talking about things. They discovered that there were certain body language tics that he had that would show that he was being aroused, including the fact that he was chained with chains, and whenever he felt like when he was retailing something and he felt like especially excited by what he was saying, he would like rock back and forth and his leg would start bouncing and it would cause the chain to jingle. And that's how the investigator knew that what he was saying was true and that he was primarily sexually motivated by a lot of this. And the really messed up part about Bill and Lorraine Currier, those are the couple that he killed in Essex, Vermont, is that he was just frustrated that he didn't get his first kill, the guy that ran inside his apartment and escaped. So he's just walking around a neighborhood, and he had a couple other rules, first of which being that he wasn't going to mess with anyone who had any children. After he had his own child, he made that a rule. He wouldn't victimize any children in any sense of the word. So he decided that if they had any sort of like play toys or trampolines outside in their yard, that was a no-go. And if they had things that made it look like they had a dog, that was also a no-go. But primarily just because he didn't want the hassle of dealing with a dog.
Yeah.
So Bill and Lorraine were an older couple, 50 and 55 respectively, and they had no children or any pets. So they made the perfect victims. And he pretty much just broke into their house and within 6 seconds was in their bedroom flashing a headlamp at them and pointing a gun at them.
And he shot him right there?
Nope. He did his classic. He had to take them to a second location.
So he took both of them, huh?
He tied them both up. He put them in their own vehicles. He took their ATM cards, their jewelry, and he took them to an abandoned farmhouse that he scoped out ahead of time. He took Bill out of the car, took him in the house, took him to the basement, and tied him up. Then when he got back out to the car to take Lorraine in, she was already out of the car and trying to book it.
Yeah, smart.
And he chased her down. And at this point, he was pissed. You know, he was losing control of the situation because she was trying to run. So he took her in the house, he tied her up. And then he proceeded to sexually assault her. In the process, Bill, probably being able to hear what was going on, was able to bust out of his restraints a little. So he's making a ruckus downstairs, and Isreal stops what he's doing, goes downstairs to deal with Bill. Him and Bill are tussling because Bill's half restrained, half out of him. And Isreal takes a shovel, hits Bill over the head twice with a shovel, and then proceeds to pull out a gun. And he said in that moment, like the 2 shovel blows would have been enough because Bill was subdued after that, but he just lost control. And he took his gun and shot Bill multiple times all over his body, his arms, his legs, his torso, pretty much just went crazy and lost his control. And then later he proceeded to go back upstairs, smoked a cigar, went back upstairs, proceeded to sexually assault Lorraine again. And then he took her downstairs so that she could see her dead husband. And then he proceeded to seat her in the same chair that Bill was sitting in. And he went behind her and he choked her to death.
Wow.
And then he took both of their bodies, put them in trash bags, 2 bags each, one on the head and one on the feet, poured about a gallon of Drano into each bag, and then...
What does Drano do?
Drano is a really caustic solution that people use to declog grease fats and stuff like that end up plugging up your sink.
I know what it's for, but like, what's it for like bodies and
stuff?
Oh,
it'll totally decompose
really?
the body, yeah.
Damn.
It's like lye. It eats through tissue and fat really easy. So the idea is that it would, you know, kind of speed along the decomp. And so then he took pieces of the house, like old broken shelves and ducting units, and tossed it over the bodies. And he was going to set the house on fire, which is another signature thing he would do, is arson afterwards to cover up. But he ran out of time, and it was daylight. So he decided to leave it, presuming that it was an old rundown farmhouse that would just be abandoned and that someone would knock it down and no one would ever find their bodies. And unfortunately, he was correct. They tried to look at the landfill for their bodies, but weren't able to ever find anything.
Wow.
So the only reason that they know where Bill and Lorraine are, you know, or were, and what happened to them was because of Isreal's confession.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have known otherwise.
Wow.
And then everything else is kind of just what the FBI's tried to put together based on what he said and what he hasn't said. There was a young girl in Colville. So this was another unconfirmed one that a lot of people in his life and a lot of investigators believed he was connected to. But it was like a 12-year-old girl who was part of the Special Olympics. She was a double amputee, and she had prosthetic feet. And prior to her disappearance, she had been hanging out, at the local pool, and one of her friends saw her hanging out and like talking to Israel. And then she went missing on her way to church one day.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months later, they found her prosthetic feet and her purse near the Colville River. And then about a year later, they found her body off of a logging road, kind of in the woods.
And that's when he admitted to?
No.
But they think he did.
It was around the time when he was in Colville.
Uh-huh.
And it was also one of those things where people were saying that they saw her walking with a guy that day who was kind of tall and wearing a trench coat.
Yeah.
And then her friend had said, oh, yeah, Julie was her name. Julie had given Isreal her phone number and her home address. Like maybe they were flirting and talking at the pool. She was only 12. I think he was 16 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this was right before his family left Colville. And then he followed behind a year or two later.
Wow.
So there's a lot of these instances where there's people pulling together threads and saying he was at this place at this time. It sounds like his MO. It could have been him. But aside from the 3 confirmed ones, he never confessed to any others.
You know, the Netflix documentary Night Stalker with about Richard Ramirez.
Gosh.
I don't know if you remember, but during that documentary series, the similar thing happened where he went in a house to kill someone, but was discovered, and he was chased out of the house. And because he didn't get his fix, he went and then raped that one girl that he handcuffed to the bed, who yelled to her neighbor, "Hey," or whatever.
Yeah.
So that seems, I don't know if that's a common thing with serial killers. When they can't kill someone, they freak out and they gotta get like that itch scratched. So they just look for anybody at that point. So
I
fucking
would imagine
weird,
that's
man.
probably it, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because it's a reoccurring theme in all of these serial killers. They lament about the one that got away, and they say that it's like a really big stressor for them. Like they always wondered if that person would be the one.
Isn't it weird that people are born with those urges? Isn't that weird?
This guy had a lot of shit going for him to end up the way he was. Like, he was born that way. I'm certain of it. His mom said that he was evil.
Yeah.
But his whole family was fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, they grew up in a tent, a cabin without any power and water in Colville. And then when they moved to Oregon, they lived out of tents. His family was dirt poor. His family pretty much relied on the kids for all of like the labor and work to take care of things,
Wow.
Hunting food from the woods and shit. So like this guy didn't have a whole lot of love to begin with.
Yeah.
And he started out abusing animals. And he said in that moment when he decided that that he thought it was good fun to, torture animals, and that his friends were disgusted, that's the moment he realized that he was different from other people and that he would have to temper that side of him in order to fit in and not scare people away. And so I think from an early age, when he did his psych eval at the end of everything, he was quite above average intelligence, and they found quite a few primary and secondary antisocial traits, and it's not really surprising to see how he turned out that way, knowing his background and his family. But the thing that really fucks me up is like he had a family. He had a daughter. He had one wife, Tammy, who lived in Nia Bay, who he had his daughter with. That was his first wife, and then he left her because of her alcoholism and moved to Alaska with Kimberly, his girlfriend. And so it seemed like he didn't have a whole lot of problem with women. He had, regular relationships where he was getting fulfilled, these outside deviant urges that he had were obviously a separate side of him from the Family Guy thing. Because when they talked to people in Alaska after Samantha was found, a lot of them were like, what? He had his own construction company. He was a trustworthy dude that we would literally give a key to our house to so he could come and make repairs while we were gone. So the idea that he was an opportunistic killer freaked a lot of people out after the fact because they wouldn't have guessed.
Wow.
Which is weird. You'd think that, you'd hope that you'd be able to see that in someone.
Yeah, I don't know what the signs are. I don't know if I've ever met. Okay, one time. So when I lived in Las Vegas, I lived in there twice. I don't know if it was the first time I lived there or the second. I think it was the first time. I was 24, and I used to go to the Bellagio and play poker every day. And at one table, there was always this man, this woman, and that woman's daughter. and we'd be sitting at the poker table, and there's usually 9 people to a table.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting there playing poker, and they were regulars. You'd see them there all the time. The woman would be playing, and the guy would be behind her, kind of just looming, but like in a very creepy, dark, controlling way. And this
Right.
guy had really dark eyes, like black almost, right? And I don't know if this was true, but from going there to play poker all the time, I became friends with other regulars and, some of the people who worked there and
Yeah.
whatnot. Someone told me that. So their daughter, and it was overall a strange vibe.
Right. Right.
It was a really weird vibe where you weren't quite sure what was going on. And the daughter would come there like scantily dressed, but in a weird, awkward way. Like she wasn't, how someone might wear like the belly shirts or
Oh
like,
yeah. Crop tops.
yeah. She was just dressed weird, but like showing a lot of skin, not inappropriate, but awkwardly.
Yeah.
But someone told me that someone had like asked if he could. One of the guys who was there playing poker, or whatever, asked if he could like hook up with her, and
Oh.
the guy said, "Yeah, how much money?" Like,
Oh God.
and like gave him like $500 or something weird.
Ugh.
But you could tell it was you could tell she was nervous. Not the daughter, but the woman was nervous having him around. Like when he was there or behind her, she was you could tell her vibe and her energy was off. But it's the only person I've encountered or met in my life that just felt very dark. Like
Mhm.
something was seriously off. Like they would be capable of killing someone.
Yeah.
Like it's the only person I've ever met in my life I've always remembered. It's been 17 years, but if I ever had to bet money on people I've met who would be evil enough to kill, I felt like that would be the guy.
Yeah.
You could just feel like the darkness,
Oh,
like in their
definitely.
eyes.
Well, and that's
you know.
that's a funny point you bring up because a lot of the investigators for the Isreal case were saying that like that's what he had. He had dead eyes. Like you
Yeah.
look at his eyes and they're
Black.
just like black, no soul, kind of like shark eyes.
Yeah.
And I know of one person who has killed people. It was government sanctioned,
Mhm.
so it's not anything.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I can't really say too much because I don't really know too much,
Uh
and I'm also sworn to secrecy
huh. By who?
by the guy.
Uh huh.
He was a family friend, but
Uh-huh.
he had those eyes. He was like a nice guy, and he
Yeah.
didn't have like the sketchy vibe. He was kind of like a weird uncle,
Uh huh.
but when you look at his eyes, you'd be able to see it. Like he was
Yeah.
always really friendly to us kids. He'd like let us play with
Yeah.
all of his fun tools, like his night vision goggles and shit. But
Yeah.
he definitely had that soulless look to his eyes, and I feel like it's almost an instinctive thing that you have inside you when you meet someone and there's like something dangerous about them.
Yeah.
In your brain you're just like, am I being
Yeah.
judgmental or am I trying to save myself?
Well, you got that primal lizard brain looking out for you.
Yeah.
You know.
Definitely.
I heard. I believe you know the movie Blow with Johnny Depp.
Yep.
So I remember listening to the commentary, and I think George Young was on the commentary for the DVD. I'm pretty sure he was. Years ago I listened to it. And he talked about when he met Pablo Escobar that his eyes were black. He goes, he was a killer, like you could tell when you looked at his eyes.
I believe
And it seems to be something about people that kill for pleasure or for diabolic reasons or whatever. It seems to be like, I don't know if they're born with eyes like that or if they turn into
you lose
that.
your soul. They say that eyes are the window to your soul.
Yeah.
And so, if you've killed someone, you lose your right to have a soul.
It does
You're no
something to
longer
your
human.
eyes. It like colors them dark.
Right? All the colors sucked out of your
It's
iris.
weird. Yeah.
Make us deal with the devil.
Uh-huh. So is there anything else you want to add?
Pretty much, I would like to maybe list off some of the potential victims.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot of information about them, as you
Mhm.
might imagine, because of how much you like to control the narrative.
Yeah.
And he also wanted an expeditious trial. He wanted the death penalty, and he wanted it within a year of when he first started getting interrogated. And they told him, that's not really the timeline on how things work. We can't promise that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was insistent upon it. And he said, if you don't do that, then I'll just off myself within a year.
Yeah.
So they kind of were at an impasse, and they were trying to keep him engaged and giving information, and clearly it didn't work because he did end up killing himself. But what they've gotten from him, their confirmed victims were Bill and Lorraine Currier from Essex, Vermont, June 8th, 2018. I had already previously mentioned them. They were sexually assaulted and dumped at a farmhouse and killed. The other one was Samantha Koenig. That was the other confirmed one. Anchorage, Alaska. She was 18 and she was abducted February 1st, 2012. Unfortunately, other than that, they have some ideas on who the other 8 the other 8 people are.
And were they mostly women, or was it like equal women and men?
They were mostly women.
Uh-huh.
There were a couple couples that he would kill. Bill and Lorraine were one of them. There was another homicide of an unknown couple in Washington. He didn't give any details about what the victim's relationship was, like if they were, husband and wife or girlfriend and boyfriend or what. He hinted that they are buried near a valley. And he said he didn't know whether or not they were even locals. If they were tourists, people came down from Canada, and he just killed them. He didn't really know. But that was between 2001 and 2005. And then an unknown person in Nia Bay, July to October 2001. 2 separate homicides that are unknown between the summer and fall of 2005 and 2006. He disposed their bodies in Crescent Lake, Washington.
Oh, shit, I've been there.
Yeah, have you? The Olympic
times.
National Park?
Yeah.
He frequented that area, and they never found the bodies.
Wow.
He weighed their bodies down with anchors. He went out on his boat, and he dumped them in. One of the people suspected of being Gilbert Gilman, who went hiking in the Olympic National Park by himself for photography reasons. And then he was never found, and he was reported missing. His car was found at the ranger station out there, and he never confessed to it, but that's one of the links that they're trying to build.
Yeah.
He confessed to dumping 2 people in separate instances at Crescent Lake. So they're thinking one of them could be Gilbert. Then there was an unknown East Coast homicide that took place potentially in New Jersey before he dumped the body, or rather buried the body, in upstate New York. This one, they're trying to connect to a woman named Deborah Feldman, who's 49. She was kind of a drifter. She was really heavily drug addicted, and she was a prostitute. So unfortunately, she made like the perfect victim. He claimed that he didn't know her at all. And then when they showed him a picture during the interrogation of her face, he said, I don't want to talk about her yet. So again, like, even though you can't actually confirm it because he didn't say, yes, I did this, clearly there was some familiarity with her.
Yeah.
And the timeline adds up. The other one was Julie Harris, 12-year-old from Colville that I mentioned earlier, with a double amputee. Again, never confessed, but witnesses kind of tied him to it. And then there was another missing 12-year-old from Colville. And this one was a particularly interesting case that I actually learned about well before I knew about Isreal Keyes. It was a mother and her daughter. The daughter's name was Cassandra Emerson. She was 12 years old as well. And the mother's name was Marlene. And apparently there was a mobile home fire. And Marlene's body was found in the fire, and they never found Cassandra. They didn't find any remains. So they're thinking that she was kidnapped and that the arson was used to cover up the kidnapping. And even though he wasn't ever convicted or confessed to this one either, he did say that his first arson was a mobile home, and it fit the timeline for around when that one happened. Cassie's body was eventually found a month later on some logging roads nearby, about 3 miles from her home. A couple other ones. There's Suzanne Lyall, a 19-year-old college student who went missing from Albany, New York. She was last seen riding the bus home from work, and once she got off the bus, she was never found. And that's another one of those where he didn't confess, but he was in the area at the same time. They can kind of speculate that maybe he was involved in that. And then there's another one, James Tidwell, 58, from Dallas, Texas. And this one's kind of unique because, you were asking about the age dispersion for his victims. primarily it seemed like he would go after men if it was opportunistic, but it seemed like mostly he would go after couples where it was a woman and a man.
Yeah.
But in 2 instances, Gilbert Gilman and James Tidwell, they were individual men by themselves. Tidwell was clocking off of work from his overnight shift. It was 5 a.m. and his truck was found about 4 miles from his house. He was never found. They found video footage of Isreal going to a Walmart nearby, and he bought like a bunch of things like a shovel and some lube and some other stuff that make them think that he was
Lube?
Lube, yep. Because again, he was bisexual and he was very sexually motivated with all of
Wow.
these. And I guess you could argue that this is what happens when you're repressed sexually, and you know,
Right. That's one path.
because
Wow.
yeah. And again, he didn't confess to the homicide for Tidwell, but he did confess to an arson that happened in the next town over the next day, as well as a bank robbery. And he claimed that the arson was to distract from the bank robbery, but
How is how is he doing all of this when he's like married or has a girlfriend? Is his girlfriend not like, where have you been?
she's a traveling nurse.
Oh, okay.
And so she was traveling all over the PNW herself. And then he actually got custody of his daughter because his mom, or the girl's mom, Tammy, was an alcoholic and she was struggling with her sobriety. Which is kind of interesting because so was Isreal. He actually, his only criminal record when they found him was a DUI from when he was in the military. That's the only criminal record he had.
Wow.
So apparently he was a pretty big alcoholic. He also dabbled in like coke and LSD and weed. Everyone smokes weed though, so I don't.
We all?
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't make a killer.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much kind of still up in the air. The most recent article I saw was from, I think, March of this year, where the FBI was actually asking for any sort of tips or leads that people might have after the fact, because they're still trying to piece together the total.
Is there any
11.
video footage of detectives, family members, witnesses on YouTube or anything?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about victims or his family, but he there's a lot of police interrogation video online. There's also a book called The American Predator, I believe.
Okay.
And it was the woman who wrote it was filing a bunch of requests for paperwork regarding this case. And she's actually the one who kind of brought all of this out to the light. All of her FOIA requests were kind of culminating in what we see now today as his confessions and all the interrogation tapes and stuff. The fucked up part is when you watch these interrogations, he's laughing the entire time. And his laugh is so dumb and so self-righteous. And all the investigators in the room were like, you know, you can tell they're super uncomfortable with this guy, but they're trying to get him to continue to talk. But he's just like laughing at his own jokes and kind of like laughing about how he almost got away and laughing about how Samantha Koenig's boyfriend like came out of the house and saw him, but then didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy how even after he realized that like the gig was up, your life is over. You screwed over your daughter's chance at a normal childhood. And he's still trying to control the narrative and still laughing about all of it. He had zero remorse. That was kind of a trademark for him. He really hated the BTK killer, the bind, torture, kill guy, because he said that he saw an interview with him and he didn't like that the BTK killer was remorseful and that he expressed remorse. And the investigator interviewing him said, "Do you really believe that BTK was remorseful?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I could see it in his eyes." And he said, "I think that's a sign of weakness."
Wow.
I have no remorse for what I've done. In fact, I get enjoyment out of all of the things I've done, all of my antisocial behaviors.
Crazy. Man, it just goes to show you, man, there's like people with brains out there that are just different.
Yep.
Or they're just wired for that sort of thing.
Yep. And then you get the perfect storm of the social environment when they grow up, completely destroying their sense of self-worth.
You take someone, what was that famous saying, genetics load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger.
Yep.
But it's true. Like we study this in school. You know, we all have a certain amount of genes that are turned on or off.
Right.
And, you know, if you have a predisposition for like anger or anything, and you grow up in a family that's maybe violent, it's going to turn those genes on, and you too will then become a violent, angry person.
Right.
If you know if you have a predisposition for those genes, but you grow up in a very loving, calm family, then they might not ever get turned on, and you might not ever.
You've got good coping mechanisms. You don't need the anger and the impulsivity.
And the problem is with obviously kids is they're stuck at home with no escape for like 18 years.
Yep.
So whatever trauma is happening during the most important stages of a person's development. So.
Yep.
I mean, your brain and your nervous system wired for survival.
Definitely.
So if you're living in a very violent or aggressive or dysfunctional family,
or unstable,
you're gonna develop your brain and your nervous system and your fight or flight response and your anxiety and like your anger and how you cope and how you deal with emotion. Like it's all gonna reflect how you were like brought up and raised, and you can create fucking monsters, man.
This is true. Yep. So definitely think about spanking your kids and stuff. Don't do it.
Yeah, not good.
Too many serial killers already.
Right.
But no, it's that is a really good point that you bring up about how with a lot of these situations it's not just one thing, and that you can kind of almost track the trajectory that these people take, and it's almost like hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
On one hand, it'd probably be a little bit unethical to like take people before they've done anything wrong and say, oh, you're going to be a killer in the future. I can tell by your brain scans, and then put you in jail before you've even done anything.
We're not at that point in the downfall of our society yet.
But theoretically, if you could find a way to identify these people ahead of time and get them into
Minority
intervention.
Report.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Get some medication into them and get them some good therapy.
Well, they can see, like you mentioned, on brain scans.
Yep.
Who has antisocial personality disorder, because I'm pretty sure it's the gray matter in your brain. They have a lot less.
Right.
It's just a biological thing. And it's like, so when I was studying psychology, one of my professors, he also had his own practice. And, you know, he was saying there's really not much help. I mean, this was 20 years ago, but he goes, you know, there's really not much help for people like that, because you're literally just missing part of your brain, like the gray matter. And he goes, he refuses to treat psychopaths in his practice because he's had them in there before, and he's like, they just try to manipulate you, and he goes, they just tell you what you want to hear, and they're not really getting better, and nothing's really happening, because it's all show.
Right. They're not benefiting.
They fake emotion. They fake what you want to hear.
Right.
And so he's like, yeah, I refuse to treat any of them or deal with any of them in my practice. And he goes, there's really not much you can do. There's not much help. And it's not like there's a medication you can take, or they could do like gray matter brain transplant. Like your brain is your brain.
Put a chip in your brain.
And so it's like, I mean, like you can't, as of right now, we can't change sexual orientation. We can't change like your likes and your dislikes and what music you love and what foods you love. Like a lot of those things are just programmed.
Right. Just part of who you are from the very beginning.
And if you're a serial killer, I mean, if you're born with that antisocial personality brain, and like, I don't know what you do with that. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, how do you fix that?
Probably, I don't know. The thing is, the hard part about that is, in order to acknowledge that, you have to have some level of like empathy and awareness, and it sounds like that's kind of lacking in a lot of the sociopaths.
Well, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but maybe I even did it on the first one with that serial killer example that I talk about, that little boy who runs into the road.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'll tell it one more time. So when I was in college, I had to write a paper on serial killers, and you had to have like 3 or 4 sources or whatever. So I read this book on serial killers, and there was a movie, I think Nicole Kidman played a serial killer, and so she was asking like these detectives and these other guys, you know, like, what's it about? How's, you know, trying to get information. But they were saying, okay, imagine like a little boy is chasing a ball out into the street, and the boy gets hit by the car,
right?
And all the neighbors and everyone's gathered around crying, upset, hysterical. Someone with antisocial personality disorder will stand there and look at them reacting, not understanding why they're crying and acting that way, and then they'll go in their house and they'll act it out in the mirror, the emotions they saw in other people,
trying to replicate,
because they can't feel it. Like it doesn't, like, it's hard to imagine, but just imagine no empathy or compassion or feeling for like human suffering, and then seeing a bunch of people cry and be upset when you don't feel that. You're like, it's confusing. So they pretend, they go and they act it out in the mirror so they can like fake it.
It makes sense. I mean,
there's lacking.
it's definitely
you know?
something you see over and over again. And even Isreal Keyes, he said that, part of his thing was that he knew he was different and that the way that he felt and the way that he thought was inappropriate, so he'd hide that part of him away. There's a certain level of awareness, but
Yeah.
not
The
much
last
you
one
can
I'll mention
change.
is O.J. Simpson. Not the first murder that he got away with, but when he finally got put in prison for stealing and armed robbery or whatever that official,
Yeah.
and he was in court crying, saying, "I didn't know what I was doing was a crime," and like, it just felt so fake and so put on.
Oh, definitely.
Like, what a fucking dude! And the fact that guy is out just golfing now on Twitter is insane to me. But anyways, all right. Well, that was great. We are gonna move on to. I think we're probably gonna do this in 2 parts. I think we'll probably do part 1 with you. So this is the death of Don Henry and Kevin Eyes.